You asked what my philosophical mission was, in lieu of other background, as I refuse to say my background in terms of what my formal education or even main influences are, or foundational books. I give hints at those because I'm not trying to hide them, but in this question about my background in terms of my philosophical mission, or you just background in terms of what set me on doing whatever it is philosophy is. You struck an apt voice for such questions. Now, if I expect you to listen to an explanation of knowledge, I should tell you what I think knowledge is if you ask or dispute some detail. If you ask me a pointed question in the context of sincere dialogue, I feel obligated, to some degree, to reply. So in terms of my philosophical background and in terms of who I have read and garnered the most ideas from, I don't offer any information. I consider such information counterproductive to my goals taking part in this activity. I consider the wide public debate. Such information degrades the meaning of ideas themselves and introduces a counter-progressive bias. If some perspective is needed to understand an idea, additional perspective, and some always is, we should discover that as a process and product of a process of inquiry, not with some characterizations slapped on, things we think we already understand. The practical reason this is the case is that we then avoid discussions of, but did you understand really? Did you really understand what so-and-so's idea was on whatever? I don't want my ideas that I present here to depend on if I understood someone else. If I got an idea from someone else by misunderstanding them, I'll vouch for the version that I have, and that's easier to do without reference to them or reference to claims that I really know what they thought. My favorite philosophers and artists make themselves hard to take any other way. By the way, it's hard to accept them whole, So, having said that, in contrast to that, when you ask me about my philosophical path, basically, I couldn't find your exact wording after as much looking as I was willing to do, but when you ask that, it brings to mind what lies at the trailhead, the continuity between now and then. The answer to that question is clearly the logical and chronological antecedent to my current perspectives. Maybe it would be always for anybody, but in my case, the answer in my case. So I'll tell you. The first question I considered, which was an attempt to consolidate a lot of stray oddities that had concerned me, was, what is reality? What is reality? Which means also, what is the meaning of the term reality? Okay, this is what made it interesting, really. What is the thing over which this term extends? What do we mean when we say it? And when we refer to something being in reality, where is the thing we're referring to? Exactly. What had interested me up to this point, just as long as I can remember, were lots of little confusing and neat things, scientific things, new agey idea things, just speculative fictions of various kinds, some of which weren't speculative, as I say, came from science. I like things that are confusing in the sense of M.C. Escher, that they're clear but confusing. I don't like the type of confusing that you get from David Lynch, where, it's just like, what? I want the type of confusing that all fits back together, like quantum physics gives, or the unimaginable detail of something like the DNA, and just the process of learning about it and finding out that this is the blueprint for our life. That's cool. The discovery of galaxies, the laws of physics as they apply in billiards. There's a lot of neat little things that fit together, and often they're a mix of counterintuitiveness in there somehow. And I just like these kinds of things. But it turns out I like the kind of confusions that work out. And this is the great thing about modern physics, is that it works out somewhere. The results of an experiment are confusing, and the experiment is controlled so well that you know enough about it to know, yeah, that's confusing that the numbers or whatever worked out that way. But it works out somehow because this is in the real world, right? It's not like if somebody writes a science fiction story with weird stuff and you go, oh my god, that's so weird, and then you realize at the end it's like, yeah, they didn't actually piece together. It was contradictory. In the real world, in some sense, you know that it's not contradictory. In other words, insofar as nature allows contradiction, then our idea of contradiction was wrong. That that's the whole point of the multi-universe idea, is that if the coin could be flipped and come up heads and tails, that's contradictory in one universe, but if you have two universes that split, then it's non-contradictory. See, in some sense, the real universe is just defining what is really contradictory and what is only apparently contradictory. So I like puzzles where some idea helps it work out. It's like the earth is moving, that makes no sense, it's confusing, but we can just find the idea and realize how everything works, and that we're stuck to the earth, we're moving with it, and suddenly we have a better picture of reality, and it all makes even more sense than it did before to think that the earth was an unmoving thing. So I'm looking for that idea.